Welcome to That's Inclusive, where we talk about disability and what it means to live a full life engaging in our communities. What does that look like, and how can we work together to make our world a more inclusive place?
Well, hey there, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of That's Inclusive. This is Pat Vincent Piety here again with my good friends Seana and Vanessa. Today we'll be talking about chapters in disability rights history. We've all come up with what we think is some really important moments, although this is only a small sampling of the diverse and long and interesting history of disability rights. We'll be including some stuff in the notes for you to study more, so we hope you enjoy this latest episode, and we're going to start today with Seana.
Thank you, Pat. Hi, everybody. This is Seana Hallberg. I am going to be speaking today about neurodiversity, disability justice, and a little bit about my personal story. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and welcome back. Today, I want to highlight the neurodiversity movement and why it matters, not just for autistic people, but for disability justice as a whole. Neurodiversity is the idea that neurological differences like autism, ADHD, and dyslexia are natural variations of the human mind. Autism is not a disease to be cured. It is a neurotype, a way of being. The real barriers autistic people face aren't inside of them. They're built by society. This movement is deeply personal to me. I'm neurodivergent myself, something I only discovered recently, and I'm married to a neurodivergent man. Together, we're raising 3 children, 2 of whom are disabled. With the right supports, they're thriving today, but getting to that point has taken everything. We've had to relocate to another state. We've been through litigation with a school district. I had to leave my career. We faced financial, social, and emotional challenges, and my own health has taken a hit. Most families don't have the privilege or resources to fight in the ways we have. That's why systems must change, because when supports and accommodations are in place, disabled children and adults can flourish. My children have given me true sight. I grew up in a world where image was everything, where appearances mattered more than authenticity. It took my children to show me what really matters: honesty, persistence, brilliance, and the courage to live fully as who you are. Looking at the milestones in the neurodiversity movement, there are a few that I want to specifically address. In 1998, sociologist Judy Singer coined the word neurodiversity. She reframed autism and other neurotypes as natural parts of human variation, not deficits. In 2006, autistic people founded the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, or ASAN. For the first time, there was a national organization by autistic people for autistic people. They shifted the conversation away from awareness and cure towards acceptance, rights, and self-determination. In the 2010, the Actually Autistic movement online gave autistic people their own voice, a grassroots pushback against organizations like Autism Speaks, demanding representation in policy and media. And autistic advocates have achieved real policy wins, from pushing for bans on electric shock devices to shifting funding away from eugenics-style cure research and towards supports in quality of life. I'd like to speak a little bit about the problem with Autism Speaks. For too long, Autism Speaks has dominated the conversation about autism, but they don't represent autistic people. Their campaigns frame autism as tragedy, pour millions into cure-focused research, and exclude autistic voices from leadership. They spread fear instead of understanding. Autistic-led groups like ASAN have fought back. Their motto says it all: nothing about us without us. This is why this matters to me. These milestones aren't just history, they're hope. They inspire my own path as I'm working towards licensure in clinical mental health counseling, focusing on neuro-affirming counseling. I want to stand with autistic and disabled individuals, not as someone trying to fix anything, but as someone helping to dismantle barriers and walking with them towards better quality of life. This is also about social justice. Neurodivergence runs in families, and we deserve communities, schools, and systems that recognize and support that reality. Disabled people are not broken. We are a rich, diverse demographic who deserve robust, supported lives. So today, instead of listening to organizations that profit off of fear, let's listen to autistic people. Let's stand with organizations like ASAN and with the actually autistic community, and with the broader disability justice movement. Because our children don't need more awareness campaigns that stigmatize them. They need acceptance, real supports, and the freedom to grow into who they are. Autism does not need to be cured. It needs to be understood, respected, and embraced. Thank you for listening, and thank you for standing with me, for standing with all of us as we work towards a more just, inclusive, and neuro-affirming future. Thank you.
That was great, Seana. I really didn't know the history of ASAN. I knew that it existed, so thank you for sharing some of that history and remembering how far back it goes. But for a story that goes way back, way back machine.
Well, first, before I start, I want to also say thank you for bringing up ASAN. I have always found Autism Speaks to be very problematic. And when I talk to people who are like actually in the community about that, they're really shocked about like, oh yeah, when I tell them like why I have a problem with them, they are like, oh, I didn't realize that.
People don't know. I, a week or two ago, got a beautiful text from a friend whose young son was in home-based daycare with my children, and he chose to wear an Autism Speaks armband at his football game and asked his mom to take a picture, and she sent it to me, and I didn't have the heart to say anything because the gesture was so kind. And people, I see mothers of autistic children all the time on social media, lighting it up blue. Puzzle pieces, right? Tattoos that are puzzle pieces, and the actually autistic community are the ones that taught me that is not their chosen representation. Their chosen representation is much more red and gold and the infinity symbol, and that the puzzle piece is very problematic because it assumes that there's a missing piece.
Right. It framed it as a problem to be solved.
To be solved,
right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
And I just want to say, to the individuals that are actually autistic listening, and to whether you're an autistic mother raising autistic children or a non-autistic mother raising autistic children, that my heart is with them this week. It's been a really difficult week for autistic individuals with all of the narratives that are going on about what causes them to be the way they are. And I just want to honor the fact that, so many of us that are living that life know that is not the case, and know that you are just so worthy in your own right of just being who you are, exactly as you are, and that there is nothing that needs to be fixed.
That's right. Yeah. And let's remember not to confuse power with expertise.
100%. Thank you.
Exactly.
And I also want to add that ASAN has incredible resources. I rely on them a lot when I need to reference something. They are experts in plain language. So if anybody is interested in looking up any kind of resources that are relative to autism and the autism community, I urge you to check them out first. They usually come up with things very quickly.
Yes, they're my go-to when it comes to the autism community.
Yeah, so thank you for bringing both of those up. You'll be shocked to hear that I chose something that was intersectional with workers' rights, disability rights.
You know.
And I have a disclaimer that the word handicapped will be referred to in this section. It will be used in order to... So I have a disclaimer. The word handicapped will be referred to in this section, and it is being used in order to be accurate when addressing historic names and the communications. So in 1935, a group in New York City called the League for the Physically Handicapped formed to protest discrimination by the Works Progress Administration, which was WPA. The WPA was an agency established during the Depression as part of the New Deal to create millions of jobs for people through public works projects, and most people have heard of the WPA. The League's 300 people, most disabled by polio and cerebral palsy, all had been turned down for WPA jobs. The Home Relief Bureau of New York City was supposed to forward their job requests to the WPA, but was stamping all their applications with a PH for physically handicapped as a signal to the WPA not to give these people jobs. Members of the League had a sit-in at the Home Relief Bureau for 9 days and went to the WPA headquarters and held a weekend sit-in there. And just to contrast, in that same year in the United States, a Dr. Alexis Carrel, who was a Nobel Prize winner, who had been on the staff of the Rockefeller Institute, published a book titled Man the Unknown. Have you heard of it?
No.
In it, he suggests the removal of the mentally ill and the criminal by small euthanasia institutions equipped with deadly gases. So some things don't change. The League of the Physically Handicapped, or L.P.H, was the first direct action civil disobedience disability organization in the United States. It was, again, founded in New York in 1935 during the depths of the Depression, and it had a single goal: to redirect a tiny portion of the New Deal employment programs towards people with disabilities. This disability rights group was surely on its way to being forgotten to the annals of history. But thanks to historian Paul Longmore, we have the benefit of revisiting this important part of the disability justice movement and learning from its success and its failures, and help in identifying where pro-worker groups fail to organize cross-sectionally to enact change. Initially, a group of 6 people with disabilities grew to a membership of several hundred, and although many believe that it did not succeed, that they failed to seed an ongoing activist movement, they set a precedent for civil disobedience that would be taken up decades later by then children with disabilities who went on to pioneer the modern New York City disability rights movement. They also were finally able to secure employment for thousands of individuals through this direct action. The League's first action was a sit-in of the Office of the Emergency Relief Bureau in New York City. The sit-in was enacted when the director of the Bureau refused to meet to discuss their unwillingness to refer people with disabilities to the WPA. During the sit-in, a Mrs. Abramowitz, when denied entry to the building, went to a nearby communist-sponsored United Youth Day protest and rallied hundreds of protesters to join in at the last minute. It was reported that thousands of onlookers and hundreds of protesters were at the door of the building, and this attracted popular support and a lot of press attention. I will, in the show notes, attach the image of part of the original flyer promoting their protest, and the top of the flyer has the text "Death Watch" as the heading of the flyer. And I think that just goes to show how critical that they felt that this protest was. After days of picketing and sitting in at the administrator's office, the membership were arrested, and the judge assigned to their case was locally famous for his harsh views of strikes and picketers. The trial was considered performative, and all of the accused were convicted. Undeterred, however, more demonstrations followed, and they made their way to Washington to continue their sit-in. Later actions included picket lines and demonstrations, and League members spoke to labor unions and progressive organizations in an attempt to educate them on disability issues. Many of those attempts failed. Like many groups struggling for economic and social justice, the ones that want to disrupt the system of oppression created and maintained by the ruling class, the League was accused of being communists. This was a tactic often used by the government to oppress social justice organizations and individuals. So again, not much has changed.
Nope.
The group dissolved in the late 1930s, although some records indicate that some chapters continued meeting into the 40s. The head of the National New Deal Office demanded that they state their claim against the WPA and the Roosevelt administration in writing. So they responded by developing an unprecedented written statement that remains a powerful critique of American society and its relationship to people with disabilities. This was called the Thesis on Conditions of the Physically Handicapped. And thanks to Longmore, it was rediscovered and scanned to the San Francisco State University archives. And here we are 80 years later, and today, this document remains generally unknown to the disability justice movement, the workers' rights movements, and to the public at large. This was a first-of-its-kind statement that combines a political and economic critique with a manifesto of survival and independence. And this was met with hostile response. FDR never responded to the thesis and never adopted the League's analysis or advice. And as I said, the group later dissolved in the 30s and the 40s, and you can find more information on the League in our show notes. And a side note, the New York City building that the protest was held in is now owned by Google.
Huh.
So like I said, I have a lot of stuff to put in the show notes to learn more about that.
I've never heard of it.
I think that so many people don't realize how far back the disability rights movement has gone, right? Most people, I had heard of it, but I hadn't read a whole lot, so that was great. I'm going to steal that for one of my presentations.
You are welcome to. I mean, there's a lot more to the story, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
But, I would have to go on and on.
Well, that's the thing. I could go on and on about mine, too, and we're going to have to... Oh, there we go. It turned on. So we're probably going to have to edit that part out. But thank you so much, Vanessa. That was so interesting. And I'll remind people that these are just teeny little pieces in hundreds of years and hundreds of thousands of hours of activism that we have just begun to scratch the surface. Today I'm going to talk about something that really influenced my story, becoming a disability rights activist, because I wanted to always, believe it or not. In fact, for a long time I didn't even identify as a person with a disability, because I was told I had a mild disability and it wouldn't really affect me, so, I just needed a little help. And I had no idea that there was a thing called disability culture or a disability community. I'm going to start off with a quote. I decided after 41 years of battling this curse that cripples children of all ages that I would put myself into that chair. That steel imprisonment that has long been deemed the dystrophic child's plight. Jerry Lewis wrote this in a 1990 Parade article. He goes on imagining what life is like for someone with muscular dystrophy. He says, I realize that my life is half, so I must learn to do things halfway. I just have to learn to be good at being half a person. For those lucky enough out there who don't know what the Muscular Dystrophy Association Telethon was, every year on Labor Day weekend, they would host an approximately 24-hour telethon to raise money for the Muscular Dystrophy Association. It was known as the Jerry Lewis Telethon for many years because he was the host and chairman from 1966 when it was first started to 2010. Mike Irvin, a former MDA poster child, had been at the signing of the Americans with Disabilities Act just a few months earlier, and he found himself reading this article by Jerry Lewis. His blood began to boil. He was a member of ADAPT by this time, so not a fan of Jerry Lewis or the telethon, to say the least. He knew the damage that objectifying any person with a disability does to the whole community. He had heard Jerry say, in one of the telethons, God goofed up, and it's up to us to fix his mistakes, as he held up a child with muscular dystrophy. The article was the last straw. Mike and his sister, Chris Matthews, who had also been a poster child for muscular dystrophy, decided to organize a protest of the 1991 telethon. Dubbing themselves Jerry's Orphans, they protested outside the hotel where the telethon was broadcast from. Over the next several years, the protests grew and garnered national attention. Even Evan Kemp, who was at the time the Equal Employment Opportunity Commissioner under George Herbert Walker Bush, who himself had muscular dystrophy, spoke out in support of the protest, risking losing his job because he had been told by the administration that if he kept speaking out, his job was in danger. He said society saw disabled people as childlike, helpless, hopeless, non-functioning, and non-contributing members of society. And he charged the Jerry Lewis Muscular Dystrophy Association Telethon with its pity approach to fundraising has contributed to these prejudices. So at about this time, they made national news. They were on Primetime Live, which was a show back then. And I was just starting to become aware that disability was a culture and not just a limitation that I had to overcome. So this whole movement was really exciting and fascinating to me. And I was writing a one-woman play about my experiences as a course, an independent study in school at the time. And my professor, Norm, who I met with weekly to update, I told him about what was going on. And I'll never forget his reactions. He's like, Jerry Lewis is the worst. He's not funny at all. Only the French like him. So no offense to all my French family out there. I love you guys. I'm not sure what he meant by that, but I will never forget him saying only the French like him. The Muscular Dystrophy Association continued with the telethon in spite of the protest. They dismissed protesters as selfish rabble-rousers and ignored egregious behavior from Jerry. Jerry said to the protesters, "You don't want to be pitied for being a cripple in a wheelchair? Stay in your house." In fact, the Muscular Dystrophy Association launched a full-out assault against Jerry's Orphans that you can read more about in the Ragged Edge article that we will post in the show notes. Finally, in 2011, the telethon was cut to 6 hours, and they rebranded it as a show of strength. They announced that Jerry had, quote-unquote, completed his run as chairman and host of the telethon, although no one really knows what happened. In 2015, Steve Dirks, the MDA president and CEO, announced the permanent cancellation of the show of strength because of, quote, new realities of TV viewing and philanthropic giving. So no indication that the protests or had anything to do with it. But like a bad penny, it showed up again. Revived in 2020, that recently, for 2 years on social media, hosted by Kevin Hart. Jerry Orphans got the band back together and protested that one too. The disempowering charity model of disability will always be with us. Recently, leaders in our country have described disabled Americans as useless burdens, a different version of the same dangerous narrative. Some form of Jerry's Orphans will always be necessary, and I'll be here for it.
Thank you.
Yeah, we all will.
Yes, definitely. That was hard to listen to. And I keep thinking about all of the stories and how much the themes are just reemerging again and again.
Well, I just could not get over the fact that the Muscular Dystrophy Association just kept plowing forward long after. So United Cerebral Palsy, Easter Seals, all these organizations had telethons at one time or another, but most of them, so protests had begun in the 70s, protests against the telethon, and most of them had said, okay, you're right, and had given up the telethon 30, 40 years before the Muscular Dystrophy Association did so.
Yeah.
And so my only thought is, like any movement that has a really powerful spearhead, it was Lewis that kept it going because it kept him relevant.
I mean, it's the media, right?
Yeah.
It's all about money.
Right.
It's always going to be about money.
Well, and the thing, they were only getting about 30% of their annual income from the telethon, an amount that they could have easily made up.
But
They
people
didn't
are
need the
making money doing the telethon.
Right.
That's
right.
what I mean. Like, that's
Right,
where
they
the
are-
money is.
They are making money. And like I mean, Jerry Lewis would have fallen out of the national attention years before had the telethon not exist. It wasn't about people with muscular dystrophy. It was about the association, and it was about Jerry Lewis. I mean, I could go on and on about some of the just awful things the telethon did and said about Jerry the Orphans.
Yeah, and I knew about them before I met you, but when you first started talking to me about them and you started to educate me on much more details about who they were and the stuff that Jerry Lewis said and the way that they just like continued, even though people were telling them like you are damaging us. One of the things that I thought about was like how they damaged an entire generation of people's perspectives of people with disabilities. Because like when I reflect on what my grandparents' perspectives were of people with disabilities, and even my parents to a degree, I realized like, oh, some of that was formulated because they watched this thing every year. It was a huge deal. It was huge.
I watched the thing every year as a kid, and I never, I didn't see myself, right? I was not one of those people.
Right.
Until I realized that, oh my God, I was one of those people. And something about it has always creeped me out. And so when the Orphans came along, I was like, yes, that's it. That's what's wrong.
Yeah, and I mean, it's obvious that things haven't changed much with some people, with the very damaging language that our current administration is using when they're talking about people who are not white, able-bodied men, American men. But I think the thing that has changed is that we are a generation of kids who grew up with kids with disabilities in our spaces, and we know that this is not true.
Right, and certainly people, since the ADA passed, since 90, people with disabilities have been in public spaces much more. But yeah, it's hard. I just was aghast when they tried to reinstitute it in 2020.
I did not know that. That's shocking.
But I think the difference now is we have social media and we have multiple platforms where we're getting our media for good or bad, right?
Right.
So there's not just television, mainstream media that's feeding one narrative. There's also a live and robust disability culture that is educating other individuals what lived experience is like through their social media channels, which weren't around before.
That was a thing.
I think the last time we talked about the pros and cons of media. We ended the story the same way, talking about the benefits and the pros and cons of media. But it makes me think, again, when I was listening to both of you, about just the roots of ableism and really that in order to dismantle the ableism that we have as a culture, we really have to understand what ableism is about. And it is about power, right?
Right.
It's about control. And it's insidious, but it comes from racism. It comes from colonialism. It comes from oppression. And so that's like a bigger conversation, I think, for people to understand that really until we conceptualize what that power differential is, that it's hard to dismantle that until we push back on that power and that oppression.
Yes, and pushing back together.
Yes.
Right, in allyship with other marginalized groups. And certainly, I mean, one of the biggest issues with Muscular Dystrophy Association and others they concentrate on a specific disability, the silos.
100%.
The people who experience that disability. And there were fewer opportunities for allyship, and it's going back to the medical model, right? That's going back to the let's fix this group of people rather than us seeing one another as the same. Like I said, as a kid, I didn't have muscular dystrophy, so at the time, I didn't see myself at all in the people who were being objectified in the telethon, until I realized that UCP was doing something similar. United Cerebral Palsy.
It makes me think too about that the disabled community can't be alone in tackling this challenge, right? We can't just let disabled individuals fight alone, that we have to be allies and be in community and use our privilege and leverage our privilege in whatever ways we can. As good allies, we do that by having a voice for those of us, that might not be able to take space, right? So, and that's kind of, it parallels what you were just saying, that you didn't identify yourself as those people on the telethon, and then later realize the community is much bigger, right? And when we're pitted against each other, it really does a disservice to the whole movement,
It
right?
certainly does, yes.
And I think they want us to get in the weeds, right? And they want us to kind of lose our focus. And I think we need to be allies and banded together, and not just as disabled individuals, but as allies and as community members.
Very well said.
And I think that is an excellent note to end on.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you again soon.
Bye, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Vanessa Blaze, and this was a production of the New Hampshire Council on Developmental Disabilities, produced by Isadora Rodriguez-Legendre and Vanessa Blaze, with many thanks to Josh Hardy and the rest of the crew here at Concord TV. We love to have guests with differing perspectives. These views are personal and do not necessarily represent those of the DD Council.